Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Frontline Advantage. I'm so excited today to have Dan on from RADICL and Nicole on from QuestionPro. Dan and I first met at Taurayos and then connected again at QuestionPro's X Day in Austin in October of last year. Nicole and I met recently through one of our contacts at QuestionPro, and I'm thrilled to have both of them on today because they're also partners. And we can talk about how their partnership has been successful and what kinds of solutions and benefits that provides for all of us who focus on the frontline market. So without further ado, welcome Dan and welcome Nicole.
Happy to be here.
Very happy to be here. And thank you, Vivek, for the invite. We certainly appreciate it.
Dan, I want to start with you. We'd love to hear a little bit more briefly about your background, RADICL, and even some of your work in the employee engagement space with Modern Survey.
You know, I will say this. My career has been a unique one in that I really by chance and randomly fell into the HR tech space. I'm an artist, a musician, and I had an opportunity in my 20s to work for a CHRO of a very large healthcare company and just fell in love with the idea of people, strategy, and technology and how they can work together to truly, give employees a voice to actually create change, sustainable change. And so out of that, I founded Modern Survey, which was we were proud to say we were actually the very first SaaS employee engagement platform.
Wow.
So, and then shortly after us, Qualtrics came along and Glint came along, and we kind of grew up together, all trying to, out disrupt each other, all in good fun. And we grew that. I had incredible partners, my brother, Pat Riley, and my other partner, Don McPherson. And we just saw an opportunity. Employee surveying was moving to the internet. It feels like this is ancient times. But we knew data needed to come back faster. And we knew it wasn't just about what the data said at any given moment. It was about the change that you implement and the behavior change that it drives. So everything that we did was really wrapped around that, from our engagement models to the way we thought about continuous listening, moving away from what I call the Polaroid once a year survey. And so we built that, sold it to Aon. I spent about four years at Aon. It was an incredible acquisition, great opportunity. Then during the pandemic, founded RADICL. RADICL started as a change movement with HR leaders and leadership teams through large transformation changes and really organizations that understand at that point and even now that creating a human-centric workplace is critical. And it's not just words. It takes a lot of work. It's a lot of prioritization. It's a lot of digging in, understanding where we can make impact quickly, what's our long play. And we are now recently and getting ready to launch a very sophisticated AI work platform that is all built around connection and accelerating work impact for everyone.
Love it. Points around change and connection. This is all about connecting employee voice to business outcomes and AI. So excited to hear more about that. Nicole, we so often run into scenarios in the enterprise where, they know Teamforce a little bit. They try it out in a few of their locations. They get quite excited and then say, you know what? I've got Qualtrics. I've got Medallia. I have Perceptix and I have Glint. That's the reality. So many of them, they tell us. But, QuestionPro, where we've gotten to know you, or at least your colleagues, much better through X Day and even prior meeting up at Taurayos. It seems like you offer a lot of similar features at a much more competitive price point, and there's an opportunity for them to partner and get solutions like RADICL or get solutions like Teamforce that are more innovative than they might be getting exposure to today. Is that correct? And tell us a little bit more about your background and what you're doing at QuestionPro.
Absolutely. Thank you, Vivek. I am an account executive at QuestionPro. I think QuestionPro has been looked at historically, and it's, all of its years of being in this engagement data collection space as just segmented products. It's either I want to focus on customer experience or I want to focus now on the employee engagement side. But really, QuestionPro is an entire platform that you can use for your customer experience. You can use for any market research or any research projects an organization may have. And on top of that, you can then use the platform to engage with your employees and making sure you're taking care of really what is your most critical asset, the people that work for you. And we can do that at about 70% of the cost of Qualtrics on average, and have 90% of the capabilities. So 9 times out of 10, we can meet and possibly even exceed the benefits of moving away from a really higher price point solution into something that's a lot more flexible and cost effective.
Fantastic. Dan, you'd mentioned you've kind of worked with QuestionPro for about 3 years. Of course, you've done a number of different things. Tell us about that relationship and what makes partnerships so successful, especially in relation now to your new product, RADICL.
So I met the president, Sonia Lucina, during the pandemic. We actually met we were both speaking at a live event. Al Adamson, it's a PFAO, which is a People Analytics Future of Work event. There's obviously a lot of survey vendors out there, and it isn't so much about the survey technology. Again, I want to reiterate this. Data capture is sort of secondary now. It's what you do with it, and it's the strategy you wrap around it. But I think what QuestionPro does, and what I've always really appreciated, is you really start with what are we trying to achieve? What does success look like? What type of change are we trying to achieve? Which is why that really links well to what RADICL is all about. But ultimately, you have to put it into bite-size, real change that inspires people to do something different, right? And that's why. And I always say this when I'm speaking. Anything we do in the employee kind of talent culture space is all about driving behavior change. Otherwise, why are we doing it? QuestionPro does an incredible job of bringing people to the table, really understanding what is the problem you're trying to solve. So that is, Sonny and I and many other members of QuestionPro, and I know Nicole, we haven't done a webinar yet. I'm sure we will. You're talking about exactly this.
Yeah, I love that. On that point, Dan, behavioral change. We find culture change and transformation to be one of the most challenging things in organizations to get buy-in. Now, you've been there, been around the block, done so much already that you're almost willing to kind of take on something more ambitious. I remember having conversations with the team at Humu. Laszlo Bach talked about nudging and trying to kind of create behavioral change that way. It's now part of Perceptics. You mentioned Al Adamson, who was involved with Perceptics.
Yeah.
We think about behavioral change in a more micro way and not down maybe to the individual level. So I'll give you an example. Say there's a recognition issue that we see the data mention. We're able to ask about in different ways. And to solve that, it could be things like doing shout outs on the screen to recognize the people, or celebrating a team member and asking about how many years ago they joined or how long they've been on the job. But it could also be having the plant manager or general manager walk the floor, acknowledge 3 people and say thank you every week, and making that part of a standard operating procedure to try to see if that actually leads to, do you see productivity gains? When you ask the workforce, are they more likely to stay because they've noticed their manager doing that? You can see that, and then you can look at the retention numbers. Tell us how you're thinking about that kind of change. And then at an organizational level, when you're thinking about selling into these organizations, change is often scary to them. But you're someone who seems like you could actually help them with this in a way that doesn't feel so threatening. How do you make sure it's successful in that whole process?
I will first start by saying change is never meant to be or should be seen as the enemy, right? Change and change, and I'm kind of on the record of saying this, and I say this, I think, anytime I speak, change is momentum, not arrival. So as you think about change, it isn't about getting to the finish line, right? It is about continuing to evolve. That's a redesign on how we think about those KPIs that we manage towards, right? It isn't sort of, we've hit some level of success. It's momentum. And you build momentum by building trust. And you called out a few of those things. When you build trust by getting to know each other. I mean, think about interpersonal relationships with your friends or partners. I mean, trust is built over time. It isn't built overnight. Trust is built by the little things that you do consistently. Trust is actually built by taking the time to listen. It does drive accountability because I trust you and you trust me. It absolutely drives innovation. And we see this when we're rolling this out. These are things that we focus on. It builds stronger relationships. Again, why wouldn't it? We know that, right? If we trust each other, relationships will be stronger. It's first that sense of willingness and readiness to want to change. Then it's getting people around you who will support you through that change. Then it's built bringing empathy and humility into a change process, and then it's commitment to achieve change through momentum. And then it's evaluation. Right? How are we doing and tweaking and not being so worried about if we didn't quite get it just right, we can always tweak. Nicole, I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of similar with QuestionPro and the work you do. I'm sure I would guess it's a similar philosophy.
It is, and it's a message that we share with our customers when we're talking about employee engagement and wanting to make those changes. But it's also, it's like we walk the walk and talk the talk type of situation. You know, I am extremely well supported by my leaders and my colleagues. So when we show up, we show up together, whether it's internal or external with a customer, and shows that, hey, like QuestionPro is a company you can trust. You can trust that we're going to be there to help you with your initiatives and each step of the way. You know, it creates a safe space for an employee to be honest. Like change is scary. It's scary for everyone, right? The fear of the unknown, and having this empathetic, open, leadership and building that trust and rapport is just so critical when you're looking to implement these strategic changes, so that your employees can able to raise their hand, like, hey, this isn't working. And you can take the time to figure that out and evaluate and re-strategize as necessary.
Yeah, the old saying is the worst change you can make is not being willing to change at all.
Absolutely.
So that like the fear of the unknown. I mean, any organization that's stuck because, well, it's okay now. It's like, it might be. You might have a little runway, but I promise you, any organization who just sticks with what works now and doesn't continue to challenge themselves, you will not be the company you want to be 2 years, 5 years. So I'm pretty hardcore about that.
I love that. It's really nice and refreshing to hear people talk about the positives around change and the willingness to change, especially when we, in enterprises hear so many people who are afraid and the status quo. And we're in an era today where even more people have to sign off on things than a few years ago. Dan, as someone who's kind of done the circuit, you go around everywhere and you see so many conferences, events, interact with so many people. What's the watering hole? Where do you find the companies or the indicators of people raising their hand saying, I'm ready to change?
I'll answer that in two ways. Any conversation that you might have, that any of us might have about change and driving, building more human-centric workplaces and making sure we're putting people first and we're challenging the status quo and everything that we need to do. Typically, nobody will disagree with that. Where you get stuck is the how, right? How are we going to get there? And you could apply the how to a societal divide right now, right? For the most part, we all want the same thing. Where we get stuck and argue is how are we going to get there? And that's where the magic of empathy and listening and meeting and finding common ground comes in. It takes bold and brave leaders who are willing to push things forward and who can inspire their people to want to get behind it. It needs to be a little bit of a top-down, but most importantly, a bottoms-up. People need to recognize in any organization that, again, I'm here, I want to be there, and they need to feel it. They need to feel it from leadership. There are many, many leaders out there, and there are some who aren't as comfortable, and that's okay. And with organizations like that, and for those listening, leaders like that, it's okay to make some small moves. You don't have to pull the carpet out or the tablecloth out from underneath all the dishes at once. It's okay to make small moves. Just make moves. You have to make moves. You have to move forward. So that's typically the way we approach it. And if you approach it with that type of mindset, for the most part, wherever I'm at, you can prioritize and you can find something to start to work on.
Makes sense with the name RADICL as well. This idea of change and being audacious and celebrating change and not being fearful of it, like so many people are. And you have this persona, Dan, that really I feel like celebrates and makes people feel more comfortable with something that usually to a lot of people can be scary. They want to hold on to the status quo because it's what they're used to and it's their safety net. Nicole, in the world of when you think about QuestionPro, and we talked a little bit about scenarios where it makes sense for people to consider alternatives from what they may be dealing with the status quo. How do you think about change, and what are those signals you're looking for? Is it frustration? Is it unannounced, unprepared price increases they get? What are those intent signals? Is it them looking for an alternative in some way? How do you think about those moments of change and opportunity when dealing with prospects and clients?
Great question. I definitely look for the frustration. And that's typically, I find, where, my buyers, that's what they show first. That's the emotion that they show first and kind of hang with. And I do try to, dig into that a little bit. I try in some ways. I have former customers who joke that I became a therapist during some of our campaigns when I'm like, well, tell me more about that. And if I'm sensing kind of, like they want to tell me what they don't want to tell me, they don't want to give too much away. I try to just dig in a little more about that and talk about what's the business impact if you don't change. You're telling me you're losing employees. You're telling me you have to reduce your budget by 20%. If you don't change, like, is your current vendor going to help you save the 4% you've earmarked for this technology? So I try to paint a picture of kind of like what the art of the possible can be, right? Use some of their pain points and then paint this. What if I tell you, what if I can save you 5% on your employee listening technology over the next 2-3 years, whatever the contract term is. And by doing that, we're giving you a platform to better capture this data, capture the strategic initiatives that can come out of this data, and help you create the action items to make the change that would allow your employees to stay. And then from there, hopefully it's an engaging and powerful enough image that we can continue on the conversation. But it's definitely a lot of kind of reading the room and sensing the angst. And sometimes you just have to think of something crazy and see if it resonates, right? See if it resonates with the client. Because again, to the point of, we've been talking a lot about change and how the fear of unknown is a really, it's a big thing that we have to address, sort of the elephant in the room. That's the same when choosing a new vendor. People don't want to change vendors because they're used to that technology. They're used to that tech and how to work. They're used to the people that they work with. So you really have to take the time to understand their challenges, how you can make it better, and then show up and deliver on how you can make it better.
Yeah, and I just to jump in there, Nicole, I love what you just said, because that is so true. If it's a feature to feature change decision, it's the wrong way to be thinking about it. You have to, and then that's where that strategy comes in. You have to leverage it as an opportunity to reevaluate, why are we using this tech platform, this technology, this app, whatever it might be? What human outcome are we trying to achieve? What change are we trying to achieve?
And it brings a human element to it. I think, especially dealing with more of the HR side, they want the human element of this type of relationship, because it is there can be a lot of structure to it, and it's not how I don't know, people don't really thrive in strict structure, I don't think. So it just brings a human element. They know they know that someone they can trust, they know they're supported. Just kind of creates a better relationship overall.
Well, I think a theme is celebrating and championing change from our conversation today. And I think even one thing organizations can do from a KPI perspective is measure the number of innovative ideas that they actually received from their workforce, and then even implemented holistically. And Dan, your point, like why, what's the reasoning, and the how, and where's it going to get us? You're talking about the journey and the destination. And Nicole, too, talking with you about how you think about and being that therapist to empathize and to first understand where they're coming from, and then being able to say, maybe we have something for you where you will actually feel relief from this change. And so the change won't feel scary. It'll actually be a pain reliever for your stresses around what you're experiencing. So I love that theme, because, we don't hear that a lot. And organizations that do celebrate and focus on that tend to outperform. And so ask yourself, what kind of organization do you want to be part of? Love it.
Yes.
Thank you both for coming on. Do you have anything else you want to say? I know we're running up on time, but any other last words?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much again for letting me participate. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, same with me. I loved it. A great summary at the end there. I mean, again, it is about experimentation and about not being afraid of change. We're all human beings trying to do extraordinary things together. And so connection is so important in the workplace, regardless of whatever you're doing. So, and that allows change to be a little less scary, right? When you are connected and you have someone to say, well, I'm not sure about this. And those bonding moments. So taking the time to get to know each other makes change just a little bit easier. And that's good for the individual, that's good for teams, and that's good for the organization. So I love this conversation. Really appreciate being on.
Thank you both so much. We'll see you all later.
Thank you.